This episode is brought to you by the Downtown Denver Partnership. Denver's 16th Street is reopening, and it's back in a big way. On Saturday, October 4th, the Downtown Denver Partnership is hosting an all-day celebration from Market Street to Broadway to mark the completion of Denver's iconic Main Street revitalization. Starting at 11 a.m., 16th Street will come alive with a mile-long celebration featuring a brass band parade led by Guerrilla Fanfare, an REI scavenger hunt, and a local heroes music lineup. Learn more and RSVP at downtowndenver.com/grand opening. This episode is brought to you by Wise. Wise is the app for international people using money around the globe. With Wise, you can send, spend, and receive up to 40 currencies with only a few simple taps, and save up to 55% compared to major banks. Plus, Wise won't add hidden fees to your transfer. Whether you're buying souvenirs with pesos in Puerto Vallarta or sending euros to tip your Colosseum tour guide, you know you're getting a fair exchange rate with no extra markups. Be smart. Join the 15 million customers who choose Wise. Download the Wise app today or visit wise.com. Learn more by visiting wise.com/US/compare. T's and C's apply. Today on CityCast Denver. Mayor Mike Johnston has been ruffling some people's feathers lately. Recent polling data shows a growing number of Denverites have an unfavorable view of the mayor 2 years into his term. And that includes the city's top elections official, clerk and recorder Paul Lopez, who has recently been speaking out against the mayor more and more. So we invited Clerk Lopez back on the show to talk about what he thinks the mayor is doing wrong. And stick around to the end because we shared Lopez's allegations with the mayor directly and got his response. Today is Monday, September 22nd. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Clerk and recorder Paul Lopez, welcome back to CityCast Denver.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
So let's start with the most recent big story. I mean, you made headlines last week when you said the greatest threat to democracy in Denver, Colorado is not President Trump's threats, but the budget cuts from Denver's own mayor, Mike Johnston. Can you explain that? That's a big statement.
Yeah. I mean, but it's very real. I mean, I've been monitoring all the bombastic threats that the Trump administration is claiming to do, from, requiring checks for citizenship at polling places to, going back to the old days where we didn't have mail-in ballots. So a lot of that stuff is, I call it bombastic because there's a thing called state rights, and states' rights actually, it's the states that oversee elections. So all of those threats are just talk and threats. They're meant to frighten people. But the real impact that's facing Denver voters right now are these cuts, and then the overreach into an independent office to force us to have to scale back our vote centers and drop boxes. So it's not the policy from D.C.
I mean, I'm thinking about, though, how the president is moving Space Command out of Colorado, partly in an effort to pressure us to stop using mail-in ballots. That feels like a big threat to me from the president.
It's a very big threat, but it's not a realistic thing. We're not going to go backwards in Colorado. I don't see the legislature.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think the legislature or the governor or anybody's going to vote to eliminate mail-in ballots just to save Space Command. I think people's access to the ballot box is much more important than having Space Command here in Colorado. We have a national model. It's a gold standard in Colorado, and Denver continues to lead the country in terms of our voter-centric model. That's not going to go anywhere.
I think I worry because, I'm thinking of bigger things too that Trump has threatened.
Yeah.
January 6th, that seems worse than maybe what you see the mayor doing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think that, the Trump's bombastic threats and January 6th, which is absolutely a threat to us. We've been dealing with the aftermath of January 6th as elections officials across the country ever since. We deal with it today. But at the end of the day, those haven't resulted in a cut at our and access to ballot boxes in Denver. That's not what's pushing Denver to have to and to force my office to have to cut down from 17 drop boxes to 5 in next year's primary.
Okay, so this To be specific,
Mm-hmm.
the mayor proposed funding your office about $4.5 million less than the last big election year of 2024. How will that affect me as a voter?
That 4.5 million that he's underfunded our office. Our budget is 8.7 million this year. That 4.5 that he is refusing to grant us, to fund us, really in our budget request. That $4.5 million hold has no other impact more greater than in our budget than shutting down boxes, shutting down vote centers. There is no way around having to do that with that big of a cut.
But what about, I guess I would push back and say, we've got this great mail-in ballot system. I would assume a lot of folks are using that. So even less ballot boxes or less ballot drop-offs, is that disenfranchising voters when we have this wonderful access through the mail?
I agree with you. A lot of people use mail, but I'm going based off of last year and what we saw in 2024. We had lines for the first time over at Green Valley Ranch. We had lines at Union Station. We had lines in some of the more popular vote centers because they wanted to vote in person because there's this false narrative out there scaring people from using boxes. There's a lot of last minute folks, especially our young voters that are showing up to the polls last minute, and they go in person. Here's what I'm worried about, Bree. If we take down, if we have to close 12 of our drop boxes, which this would amount to be, right? 12 of our drop boxes. Let's just say in that primary, a contested primary, gubernatorial primary, a contested CD1 race, right? Somebody says, hey, love, did you take those ballots? It's election day. What do you mean? What ballots? I left them on the kitchen table. Oh, crap. Here, let me go run and get them. Where's our box? Our box is right down there. Go over there and please drop it off. We only have 15 minutes before polls close. They're running to that box, not realizing that that's one of the closed boxes. And there is no other box in sight. That's a very real scenario. And those are scenarios and those are tabletop exercises that me and my staff go through way ahead of time. All I've been doing as clerk and recorder is closing those gaps and making sure that no matter where you are in the city, you're going to be close to a drop box. We have 46 of them. This cut would have to take us down to the state minimum for our county, and that's only 38. And if somebody has to go in person because they lost their ballot, and they can go get a replacement at any one of our vote centers, then they have 12 less vote centers in the primary to do that. And to me, that, I stand by my word. I think that is a bigger threat to voting in Denver than some of the bombastic threats that we've had. That's a real impact, and I'm very concerned about that.
So then you're sitting here with me talking about this budget disagreement. Why are you talking to Mayor Johnston directly?
We have.
How did that go? What is he giving you, I guess, is the explanation for why this budget came out the way it did?
How much time do we got? This is
the too long didn't read version.
This isn't nothing new. This is the first time I've had this kind of disagreement with the mayor was in 2023. He was more concerned about how long it took to count. And I said, one, because of space issues, and two, because it's a mail-in ballot and we have a long ballot. These are human beings. These aren't machines. I'm not requiring them to stay up all night. Most of our poll workers who are paid, he didn't think they were paid. He thought they were volunteer. They're paid, but most of them are veterans and elders. They're not going to stay up all night, nor should I force them to stay up all night. And also in Colorado's system, the results come in up to 8 days post-election day because we're waiting for our uniformed overseas and personnel and Americans living abroad and folks who are clearing their ballots to be able to rectify that 8 days post-election. I've explained this to them. I met 7 times with the mayor's Department of Finance, twice with him, with other independent elected officials. And then my last time that I met with him in July, it was a specialized presentation because it was obvious, and his Department of Finance also agreed that there was a lack of understanding of how our budget works and why it fluctuates, why it goes up and down depending on what budget cycle it is. To fund a coordinated election that has a turnout of about anywhere between 25 to 35% with a 2-card ballot is going to be completely different from a midterm election in 26. That's going to be a high profile election, contested races from the governor to some of the representatives to now the congressperson in CD1, all the way to November, which is going to be a high profile midterm election that it's not just Denver paying attention to, it's the country and the world. If people haven't paid attention to what's happening in our country right now and the threat against elections and the threat against 2026, will we have an election? Hell yeah, we're going to have an election. You better show up. I'm treating that as if it was another presidential election.
So, I mean, we have to talk, though. The budget, it mean every department had to make cuts. I mean, the mayor laid off people from his own office. City services are going to be affected.
Let's be honest, a couple of people from his own office. That doesn't compare to what has happened to the Office of Human Rights and Community Partnerships or OCA or anything like that, where they were completely decimated. And for the record, layoffs shouldn't take place until we have everybody at the table, the council opining in, everybody and saying, hey, in this budget cycle, let's look at every way that we can possibly cut before we have to go to any kind of layoffs. 18 years as an elected official, I have never seen that.
Really? So you feel like this is a precedent setting? This budget?
It is absolutely precedent setting. It's not collaborative, it's not inclusive, and it's not transparent. And I think it's a terrible thing to be able to lay that and this on the foot on the doorstep of the city council and expect them to do it, and then tell them in a employee town hall that, well, you better not cut any or amend the budget because I'm going to have to lay off more people. That right there even diminishes the council's authority by the people to appropriate.
This is not the first time you've criticized Mayor Johnston.
Yeah, no.
When did this start?
When he tried to do the same thing in 2023 ahead of the presidential election. And we had a security budget. We had capital improvement budgets that we had needing to fund, right? And these are capital improvements that were recommendations by the Department of Homeland Security and the Cyber Information Security Agency. This is back during the Biden presidency when they had our backs and the federal government was there to support us. We had a whole audit done, a physical audit done, and a whole report on our building and what needs to change ahead of the presidential election because they were worried about the threats. They were worried about the fact that my old office that was in the web was shot up. They were worried about the threats that were coming across the country, and they said, Denver's not immune. Let me look at your building. Holy crap. Let's make some improvements. Here's the improvements that Department of Homeland Security will recommend. We submitted those. We said, hey, here's what it's going to cost. Only $1 million of that ask had been funded. And that's to put bulletproof film around my building. And that's to put a couple bollards and to replace the 2 doors that were breached. And that were regularly breached by a moth who was a little too dusty at the time, right? So I explained to him, this is why our budget increased. And he was asking, well, what are you doing to support my goals? And I said, look, with all due respect, I support your goals. I believe in housing the homeless. I believe in housing first model.
That got a big cut too. I mean, that was part of this budget issue that folks are having is homeless services are being cut.
Yeah. Absolutely. But the difference between my agency and all the agencies under him is that the people in the city county of Denver made my agency independent. And per the charter, there are 2 things that glare in the charter that the people in the city and county of Denver voted on in November, or no, was it? November 26, January, from 26 to 27, those 3 months. They moved to having an independent elected clerk and recorder. And that independent elected clerk and recorder came after that 2006 snafu when it was still appointed by the mayor, when there was still a commission, and people had to wait hours in line.
Do you feel like this is a personal issue of just not getting along? Has it come to that?
He and I, after 2003 and after our huge disagreement in 2003, sat down.
2023, you mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, 2023. After 2023, we sat down. I thought there was a mutual understanding and a come to Jesus, if you will, about the respect for each other's authority. and what's required of them of the charter. So, in 2025, this last year for this year's budget, being that we only had one election and we saw that the city was heading into a budget crisis, we voluntarily played ball and cut our office by 25%. That included a one-time $1 million, almost $918,000 contribution back to the city that we saved, right?
So if you're doing what you're stating, like my office did make some cuts already.
We made those cuts.
So does it feel like then that this is just a personal grievance between the two of you?
Well, here's the thing. When we submitted our budget, we said, okay, this is a 2026 budget, guys. It's going to go up again. We have 2 elections this time. These are going to be a lot more higher profile than other gubernatorials. There's going to be a challenger. It is an open seat, and the primary is also going to be open. So we got to prepare for that, and we have our data and everything that informs us on how to do that. The increase accounts for the cost of paper, 30%, the cost of postage, the cost of print, because these are mail-in ballots. 2 was the increase in the minimum wage of all our poll workers. All our poll workers are not volunteers. They're city on-call workers that we pay by at least minimum wage, right? And then the other part of that is that we had an increase in voters in Denver, 9%, which is awesome. The increase in the voting population by 9%. All that is going to account for what is needed. He's calling it an increase. He's calling it extravagant. It's not. It's what's needed to run the 2026 election cycle. And it's going to look higher than the last 2. And they said, well, in one of these meetings that I had with him, and the last one, actually, I created a whole PowerPoint presentation for him that was tailored for him to understand finally how elections work. He never accepted the invitation to come by and learn what we do. So here it was in his office, showed him it. And they said, well, why can't you run it like you did in 2022, the last one? I said, because it's not 2022, man.
So you think the mayor doesn't know how elections work?
He doesn't know how elections work. And I've tried, and especially the last meeting with him, to sit down and show him exactly how they are funded. The last time he ever stopped by our office, and I wanted to walk him through, I had budgeted almost 2 hours, at least an hour of the mayor's time, to walk him through during one of the busiest times. It was the presidential election last year. Walk him through, show him the whole process from start to finish, how ballots work, and where we are pressured, where we are pressed for space, where we are pressed for resources, efficiencies. So he would learn that. He spent 15 minutes, most of which handing donuts and shaking hands. So if I seem like I'm fired up about this, it's because I've tried everything possible to demand transparency. We've been transparent with the Department of Finance. We've done everything possible to teach them on how elections work. And also because of the fact that he and I have completely different duties. I was elected as a clerk and recorder. My job is to oversee elections.
One more thing sort of in this realm of conversation around the maybe personal nature of this, I just have to ask you, Axios Denver reported that one of the reasons you spoke out against Johnston a few weeks ago was because you had, quote, become close with the deputy executive director for the Office of Children's Affairs, and she was included in the layoffs. What was your relationship with her?
Well, I don't comment on personal matters. And I could tell you, I just said this. Our problems, the problems between me and the mayor go back 2023. There's a lot of people in the area of layoffs, people who over the last 18 years I've developed relationships with and admire, that are city workers all throughout this city that got laid off. Of course that bothers me.
Is that a threat to democracy, though? I'm just thinking about the big statements that you've made.
The threat to democracy is his lack of respect for the independent authority of my office, the lack of respect at the fact that we told him that these cuts would result in boxes being pulled or being closed and vote centers being closed. That's the threat to democracy, Bree. His decision to lay off workers before we even look at the budget in its entirety, before the council even has the opportunity to pine in, that's a huge disagreement I have with him as well. And yeah, does it bother me that people who I've become close to, or friends of mine, or people who I admired, like Scott Gilmore, who I worked with personally, to have the first park in Council District 3 in 30 years, and it was because of the partnership that I had with him, to be shocked that he was let go 4 years before his retirement? Holy mackerel. That the fact that he decimated some of the things that people in the city care about? Yes. I think that, I don't see that as something that I would do. So there's a disagreement here. It's a little bit of a sore issue, because I think, layoffs were completely unnecessary.
This episode is brought to you by the Clifford Still Museum. Engage with new perspectives in the groundbreaking new show, Tell Clifford I Said Hi, an exhibition curated by children of the Colville Confederated Tribes, now on view at the Clifford Still Museum. Discover how children interpret the artist's early works and abstract art in an exhibition that extends a dynamic exchange that began nearly a century ago. Explore your creativity in the exhibition's interactive weaving wall and be inspired in the museum's hands-on art studio. During your visit, experience a world-class collection gifted to the city, award-winning architecture, and events for all ages. Enjoy the best way to spend an hour in Denver. The Still is open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Tuesday through Sunday. Children 17 and under are always free. Buy tickets and learn more at cliffordstillmuseum.org. That's cliffordstillmuseum.org. And if you walk into the beginning of the front of the museum, my voice is in the welcome video, so you might recognize me and my beautiful family. This episode is brought to you by Window Nation. It's September and the temperature has dropped. No better time than now to replace your old or builder grade windows with custom-built, high-quality windows from Window Nation. Get the windows you want to protect and beautify your home, and choose from over 1,500 styles and colors. Plus, installation crews finish the job in 1 day or less, so you can enjoy your cozy home with minimal disruption. And guess what? This month, you can buy 2 windows and get 2 free. And you can put 0 down, make 0 payments, and pay 0 interest for 2 years. That's right, you could pay nothing until 2027. You know what? Maybe I'll convince Greg to put a window in the studio. Because currently it doesn't have one, and that's like the only thing about it is like you don't know if it's daylight. Let's get some gorgeous windows in there. Colorado sunshine, baby. Hurry! The buy 2 windows, get 2 free sale ends September 30th. Don't miss out. This is Window Nation's most popular deal. Schedule a fast, free estimate now with Window Nation at windownation.com. That's windownation.com.
Learning a new language opens the door to new friends, new cultures, maybe even a whole new life. So why not start that journey today? I'm CityCast CEO David Plotz, and I'm learning Spanish with Babbel. Babbel's conversation-based technique quickly teaches you useful words and phrases about the things you actually talk about in the real world. I've been practicing my Spanish with Babbel's AI conversation partner. I can choose my conversation topic and have a real-time dialogue. It's great at helping me think on my feet, and it's improving my pronunciation. Also, it's really easy to do anytime on my phone using Babbel's excellent mobile app. It's just one of the many fantastic Babbel tools for learning. Plus, Babbel has a real-time feedback, progress trackers, and handy visualizations, all of which make it really easy to stay motivated to learn. I want you to learn another language. So CityCast is teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Well, let's talk, because you have been in city government here much longer than Mayor Johnston. I mean, you were on city council before you won the citywide race to become clerk and recorder. You worked with Mayor Hancock. Do you think your disagreements with Mayor Johnston are an indicator of bigger issues you see with his leadership?
Well, yes, for crying out loud. If I was in his seat, and look, I don't envy that. Yes, a part of it is part of this budget shortfall is because of what's happening on the federal level. I agree with that. Part of it's part of the economy. I agree with that. But part of it's some of the decisions to wipe out our reserves, to overpromise on some of his House 1000, and then all of a sudden say, well, the cost from House 1000 is not what's draining the budget. It was really the folks who are coming here as migrants, and we have to shut down. We can't plant flowers in your parks, and I'm sorry, we got to do this because of the migrant crisis. That wasn't the whole truth. You have to be transparent in the budget. And if I was in those shoes, you know what I would do? I say, oh crap, this economic outlook does not look good. Our budget's going to take a hit. You know what? Get me on the phone with the auditor. I'd like to know where we're behind in audits, because the auditor helps us save money. Can we get him in the room? Get Lopez in here. As a matter of fact, get all the electeds in here. Get the council president in here. I'd be thinking to myself, hey guys, I got to be honest with y'all. Here's what the problem is. I need your help in identifying this. I know you guys are independent. I'm not going to here to tell you and demand that you do this, but if there's any way you possible, please. And you know what? That did happen kind of in July. And he says, I told him, I know a bunch of ideas. I said, Mayor, here's where I would cut. And I gave him recommendations. And I said, there's a lot more as well, too. Now, that's up to him. I'm not going to step on his toes. I'm not the mayor.
So what would you, I guess maybe give me one example of something you would cut that he didn't. Like if you feel like he has made the wrong decisions. Because if everybody's feeling it.
Yes, we made those cuts. And one of those cuts and one of those decisions, Bree, was to leave the web building. The space in the web building is way too big for what we need for recording. It's not efficient. It's not sufficient for record storage or elections. We have a small team on recording. In our recording, these are marriage licenses, land transactions, all those records, all the recording that people come down to the web for. We said, you know what? We can do this in the elections building. We have enough space on the bottom of the elections building, enough windows to actually consolidate that. Part of that was because we do remote marriages now, because that's something cool that we got from the pandemic. By vacating that space, Bree, they have now a whole bottom of the web that they can move people from Republic Plaza, which we overpaid for. It is a budget item. They can move those folks. It frees up space so they can move those folks from the Republic Plaza. And also some of those folks in Republic Plaza, they can work from home.
Sure. Okay. But these are your sacrifices or things that you've done. I guess my question was like, what additional cuts though? What would you, because you had to cut from children's services or homeless services or the waste management.
Yeah.
What would you do that he didn't?
Well, I would take a look at how much we are spending on that police helicopter that goes around literally waking people up, especially in working class neighborhoods of Barnum and the West Side, all over the place. I'd say, hey, can we limit how much time that is that's up there?
So because you would cut police budget.
I would look at things like that. I would say, are we being efficient? Because that thing cost a lot of money. And why do I know that, Breeze? Because I know that during the recession, that's what Hickenlooper did. And I was part of that council. The other thing that we said is all merit increases. We worked with even the police, fire, and sheriff. Their unions had a brilliant idea during the recession. And they said, you know what, we're going to hold off on our regular increases per our union contract these first 2 years until the city is in the safe. We'll postpone that, knowing that that's going to, if you promise that you'll recognize that in year 3 or 4, not 1 or 2, and we'll get those merit increases later, basically postponing it, we're good. They came to the table and did that. Okay. That's not being discussed right now. The other part of this is the fact that my office is a revenue generator. We generated $4.7 million. Guess what we're in the hole for? Guess what's missing in his budget? 4.5. We pay for that. That doesn't come back to my office. That goes straight into the general fund. We never see a lick of that. Any of the revenue that we generate in our office, that never comes back to us. And it should. And that's a policy question. It's a policy decision.
I'm assuming that your folks get paid and you have operational costs.
Absolutely. But if I wanted to be real here, I would say, okay, if this is going to end up in a policy change, which I'm actually considering, is that the revenue that's generated by my office doesn't go straight to the general fund, that it helps pay for the independence it helps pay for the bottom line of an independent office, an independent agency. So the other thing is what we employed in the Great Recession was we did a parking amnesty, ticket amnesty, right? If you had a ticket that had doubled or tripled, or you got the Colorado boot waiting for your car, guess what? Here's what we're going to do. We are going to allow a one-time amnesty for you to pay that original fine. Just come pay the original fine. We will waive all the extras, everything else that got put on there, just so we can recapture that. We are not doing that. And I'm not trying to overstep my bounds. That's the city council's decision. They're the ones that appropriate it. But the point is there are some of us that have been through this before. And those ideas are not being captured. That cooperation is the accusation that we are not being cooperative is false. I love this city. This is where I was born and raised. That helicopter flies over my house every night.
Also, for context, Denverite reported that nearly $6 million goes to the police helicopter that you're referencing, just so folks have an idea.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of that is, are we going up there for emergencies? Or are we doing that to patrol people who are protesting downtown, peaceful protesters? I couldn't help but realize when our students out there were protesting the other day that the helicopter was up in the air. Why? These are students.
When students were at the Capitol.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if that was the police helicopter or not, but it was there. And is that channel 31? Is that Flight for Life? I don't think that's Flight for Life, but I do see that up there. I do see, SWAT officers. I see, vehicles that are armored vehicles that are out there during First Amendment right protests. Are we really doing that? Is that, Federal Boulevard, every Cinco de Mayo? Do we really need that big of a police presence in overtime just because folks feel prideful, just because they're cruising up and down Federal Boulevard? Yeah, we got to protect a lane for ambulances and emergency vehicles, but do we really need that big of a presence? So I'm just the clerk and recorder. I can't make a decision over that. But what I'm charged with, that $18.7 million, is protecting that, because I know what it means to cut it, and I know what the impacts are going to be to cut that, Bree.
So you have 2 more years left in office, and I think Denverites now more than ever want to see elected officials being able to work together, especially on something as important as this. Are you going to be able to work with the mayor?
Yeah, I've been trying to. So for them to say in a press conference, really what pissed me off was the fact that in a press conference, they said that we were not cooperative. We have our receipts. 7 times we went with the mayor's office, for crying out loud, to the point where I was like, guys, hello. I'm waving my hand for folks who can't see me. Hello. Don't you remember how this works? Right? But this is the only administration so far, Bree, that I've had this problem with.
So the mayor told us last time he was on the show that he loves his job. If he runs for re-election, would you run against him?
I'm running for clerk and recorder. I filed my paperwork early to run for clerk and recorder.
Well, clerk and recorder Paul Lopez, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thank you so much. And I'm sorry to get so worked up, but we're at a point in time in our country where us elections officials are taking it on the chin, man. Our people have been vilified. They're undermined. They're threatened. Turnover is at an all-time high for folks in elections. We need people that are going to have our back.
After I sat down with clerk and recorder Lopez, we asked the mayor's office for his response and spoke with Mayor Johnston directly about these allegations and critiques. He told us that, quote, the actual facts are that the proposed cut to Lopez's office is $200,000 on a $15 million budget. It literally will require him to close just 1 position. He also said that no other agency is asking for as big of an increase, and if he, the mayor, were to give it to Lopez, it would mean laying off 40 more city employees. He also noted that over 90% of Denverites vote by mail, that the charter dictates that it's the mayor and the council's responsibility to set budgets, not the independent agencies, and that he laid off fewer employees this year than Hickenlooper did 20 years ago. According to Denverite, former Mayor Hickenlooper laid off 170 people in 2009, more than under Johnston this year. This bit has been kind of confusing because that seems to be technically accurate because Johnston initially issued 171 layoff notices, but 2 people resigned instead, so the official count is 169. In response to Clerk Lopez's suggestions for other areas of the city budget to cut apart from elections, the mayor said, quote, "I think there's little reason to take guidance from someone on how to balance the budget who can't balance a $200,000 budget gap." Finally, on the allegation that budget cuts are a threat to democracy, Johnston noted that over 90% of Denverites vote by mail and said, quote, "The notion that you can't solve a $200,000 budget problem without shutting down elections is absurd. That would be like me looking at our budget crisis and saying the only thing we can do is shut off the 911 service." That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell the police helicopter pilot about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you later.